Hi there, my name is Dr. Katie Sinks, and this video is about the 3 pillars of health. Jim Carrey has a really awesome quote related to this. He says, "I believe depression is legitimate, but I also believe that if you don't exercise, eat nutritious, get sunlight, get enough sleep, consume positive material, and surround yourself with support, you are not giving yourself a fighting chance." I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying there. There's so much research that supports that if we don't eat well, exercise, and sleep good, we aren't giving ourselves a fighting chance. We are fighting biology to have good mental and physical health if we aren't doing those things. So let's look at sleep. The research behind lack of sleep is pretty significant. There was a researcher once who decided he wanted to go on 3 hours of sleep for several years. This man ended up having serious health issues, depression, he had a stroke. There was many things wrong with him only sleeping 3 hours a night. So he was able to prove, well, that doesn't work for me. The research shows that lack of sleep leads to physical disorders, mental health problems, even mental health diagnoses. If you chronically have poor sleep, sometimes even when you fix your sleep, those behavior patterns become so ingrained that they're really hard to change even after you get back in a good sleeping routine. So melatonin is a chemical in our body that helps us sleep, and it's triggered when we engage in sleep routines. But there are behaviors that can block melatonin. So, for example, if you don't have a sleep routine, say some nights you go to bed at 9, other nights you go to bed at 1 a.m., and it's just all over the place. Well, your body's not going to know when to produce melatonin, which means it's going to be harder for you to sleep. Another thing that's going to slow down melatonin is if your lights are on in the house, if you're watching electronics, those things block melatonin too. So if you dim the lights, if you limit your electronic activity before bed, that's going to help your body produce melatonin. Another thing that can block melatonin production is actually taking melatonin. So there's a lot of people who take supplements and things like that with melatonin in it to help them sleep. And a lot of people report it working. The problem is it works initially, but it also signals to your body, oh, I have melatonin, I don't need to produce it. So then over time, you're going to need to keep taking more and more of it because your body's producing less of it. So in the long term, it doesn't help you as much as you think. So one thing that can really help your body produce melatonin naturally and help you sleep is creating a really healthy sleep chain. So basically we make associations about falling asleep. And so whatever we do right before bed is going to be part of our sleep chain. So if our routine can't be replicated in other locations, or if we wake up in the middle of the night, that's going to cause us problems. So say, for example, your child cuddles with you to fall asleep, but if they wake up in the middle of the night and you're not there cuddling with them, they're going to have a really hard time falling asleep. Another really common thing that people do is they take baths before bed. Well, our body actually needs to be pretty cool to sleep. And so if your body's too warm, it blocks melatonin and it's going to be harder to sleep. So little things like that can be adjusted to help your biology get you to sleep. So another thing that would be really helpful for your melatonin is going to bed at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every day. That routine puts your body on a clock, and your body will naturally know then, oh, it's 9 o'clock, it's time for bed. Okay, so then the next thing I want to talk about is food. So food is a big deal for our mental and physical health. And the big bad guys in the research is sugar and refined starches. They affect our mental health a lot. So, in one study done with 70,000 people, they found that you're 23% more likely to develop anxiety and depression if you're eating a high sugar diet. In another study, the participants were all diagnosed with depression, and they switched to a sugar-free, no refined starches diet, and 32% of the participants no longer qualified for that diagnosis, and literally all of the participants had reduced symptoms. So removing those from their diet made significant health improvements. So there's neurochemicals that get produced because of food. So sometimes when we're depleted of nutrition, it actually does damage to our cells. It's called oxidative damage. And there's a lot of research that supports that this can lead to depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, dementia, and bipolar. So being depleted of nutrition that we need can lead to some very serious mental health problems. Magnesium and omega-3 are some things that can help protect against that damage. So we can look for foods that have those items in it to kind of protect our brain and protect our cells and protect our overall mental health. So there's some really interesting research about gut health and mental health. So when we're looking at autism, about 60% of people with autism have GI issues, and about 70% of people diagnosed with autism also have really limited diets. On top of that, adults with autism, about 40% of people with that diagnosis also have depression. So in one study, they took a group of adults who had a depression diagnosis. They took some bacteria from their gut and they put it into mice and rats to see how the mice and rats would respond. Well, those rodents then started showing symptoms of depression as well. So there's neurotransmitters such as serotonin that help our mental health. And so our gut produces some of those chemicals, and if we're not eating well, they won't produce them, and then we're going to struggle with mental health issues. So the next thing I want to talk about is exercise. This is a really big deal too. So when we look at the dangers of not exercising, I'm just going to list some for you. Heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, increased risk for mental health issues, emotional dysregulation, decreased memory, increased ADHD issues, decreased executive functioning, diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis. So the list goes on and on. So there's some pretty serious risks to not working out. But the research shows if you do it 3 to 5 times a week for 30 minutes, there's some massive benefits. So there's some studies where people had mental health diagnoses such as anxiety and depression, and when they started working out 3 to 5 times a week, they no longer qualified for that diagnosis. Their symptoms improved that much. So by working out, what I mean is increasing your heart rate for 30 minutes. So some people don't like running, some people don't like lifting weights. That's okay. You can go for a walk, you can have a dance party, you can do Zumba. Whatever you want to do to get your heart rate up for that 30 minutes, do it. It doesn't have to be a traditional workout routine. Whatever you want just to get your heart rate going. So some of the research on exercise also showed that exercise was more effective than people's medication. So this can be a very powerful drug. So the reason that exercise is so effective for mental health is because it produces a ton of neurotransmitters, a lot of chemicals that connect our brain cells. It helps them communicate. It delivers oxygen and nutrition to our entire body. It helps our gut health. It helps our whole body regulate. So One really big benefit too to exercise is it really improves the part of our brain called the hippocampus. And this part of our brain regulates emotions, and it's our memory and our ability to learn new information. So if you exercise on a regular basis, you're going to have a better memory, you're going to have better emotional regulation. So this is a really helpful thing. So to conclude, these three things, health, sleep, food, and exercise, are going to improve your health dramatically. So sometimes we don't recognize that those things are causing problems for us because there isn't this immediate consequence. It kind of builds over time. But you will see some pretty drastic improvements in your life if you focus on these three areas. All right, thanks for listening.